Our entire family has graduated from college. However, Chris's older brother, Mike, only finished middle school. Being a middle school dropout is a disgrace to the family. I want to minimize my contact with Mike. Chris graduated from the National Defense Academy and is a promising military officer. In comparison, I only finished middle school. Having Chris as a stepson means a middle school dropout like me is now related to the family, which they can't stand. There was no need to bring this up while holding the microphone at the wedding. At that moment, my younger brother Chris stood up from the groom's seat and walked over to the father-in-law, taking the microphone. "Father-in-law, please stop insulting my brother. Don't you know who he really is?" "What? Who he really is? What do you mean?" "You don't know anything, do you, father-in-law? I'm going to announce it here today. Actually, my brother is." The entire room held its breath. My name is Mike Miller. I'm a 35-year-old working in civil engineering. I live a settled life now, but my life has been full of turbulence. First, when I was 7, my parents divorced, and I stayed with my father along with my 2-year-old brother Chris. I was a child, so I wondered why I didn't go with my mother, but it seems her affair was the reason for the divorce. Since then, all photos of my mother were thrown away, and now I can't even remember her face. If only my father had been more stable, we would have had fewer problems, but he was completely broken by my mother's betrayal. Every day, to forget his sadness, he started going to the casino, barely working at all. On top of that, he accumulated debt. From as far back as I can remember, my brother and I never experienced eating until we were full. Chris often said, "I wish I could eat my fill." Because of this, I wanted to work as soon as possible, so despite my teacher's objections, I started working right after graduating middle school. However, there were hardly any places that would hire a 15-year-old boy with no skills. The only thing I was proud of was my physical strength. So with the help of my homeroom teacher, I joined a construction company called Williams Construction as a carpenter's apprentice. Joining this company significantly changed my life. No matter how much I earned, it was obvious that my father would spend it at the casino. When I consulted Daniel Williams, the president of Williams Construction, he invited me to live with him and my brother. "It's not like I'm hiding you two, but living in a different place will keep your money from being taken." I decided to take Daniel up on his offer, and my brother and I moved to the second floor of Williams Construction's office and started living on our own. We started our days at 10 and 15, like an adventure. Because of those times, Chris and I might still be close today. The work environment was also very good. The senior carpenters seemed rough, but they lived in a world where even a 1 mm error was unacceptable. I was often yelled at while working, but I could feel the love in their voices. I truly believe I chose a good workplace. Eventually, my father got into debt and disappeared. I didn't completely ignore it, but I filed a missing persons report just for formality, and that's how it is now. As I kept working hard, time passed. When Chris was 17, he confessed to me that he wanted to attend the National Defense Academy. America has a lot of natural disasters. Helping victims is a big mission for the military. Besides, if I go to the National Defense Academy, you won't have to worry about me. I'll receive a salary and bonuses. Indeed, the military plays a significant role in disaster recovery. However, the National Defense Academy is primarily for training senior officers. Isn't it the lower ranks that are more active in disaster relief? And considering the current international situation, I feel a great sense of unease. If you're aiming for the National Defense Academy just for the money, I'm against it. There's a good chance you'll be sent to dangerous countries. Do you understand that? Yeah, I understand. Even if we are sent overseas, we'll only be doing humanitarian aid. I want to help people in need. I couldn't find any more words to convince Chris. Chris studied hard and successfully got into the National Defense Academy. With Chris moving into the student dormitory, our life together came to an end. A strange loneliness took over me, and I couldn't do anything for a while. I can honestly say my life up to that point was for my brother Chris. With Chris gone, there was a hole in my heart. The person who filled that hole was Patricia Williams, 3 years younger than me. Patricia was Daniel's daughter, who grew up around the carpenters from a young age. She said she wanted to be a carpenter even though she was a girl, which troubled Daniel a lot. When I started working at Williams Construction, Patricia was still 12 years old. But from the first time we met, I felt something fateful. It's really a strange story, but I vaguely thought I would marry Patricia in the future. Patricia was probably happy that someone close to her age had started working there. I've decided, when I grow up, I'm going to marry Mike. Guys, take good care of Mike. If you make him quit, I won't forgive you. At that time, none of the other carpenters paid any attention. I was in the middle of my teenage years, so Patricia's loud declaration of our relationship was extremely embarrassing. But Patricia looked straight at me. Even though I was aware of Patricia's gaze, I deliberately avoided making eye contact. The trigger for Patricia and me getting closer was Chris's advancement. While I was only focused on Chris and not paying attention to my surroundings, Patricia came directly into my view. From then on, I couldn't take my eyes off Patricia. Around the time Patricia was about to graduate from college, Daniel talked to me. So, when are you two getting married? If you wait too long, you'll miss the chance. Is it okay for someone like me to be with Patricia? She has a college degree, and I only finished middle school. Isn't it a mismatch? That's not an issue. The issue is how you feel. Patricia's feelings are already decided. As a man, you need to make a firm decision. I proposed to Patricia. She cried and complained. It's about time. So, Patricia and I decided to get married, but the issue of our last names concerned me a bit. Patricia is the only daughter of the Williams family, and we have no reliable parents to turn to. So, it seemed natural for me to join the Williams family and become Mike Williams. However, when I talked to Daniel, he flatly denied it. Your marriage to Patricia has nothing to do with the Williams family. Just because you're Patricia's husband doesn't mean you'll inherit Williams Construction. I'll decide my successor. I thought Daniel's words were natural, and I wasn't disappointed at all. Rather, I felt relieved and held a wedding to make Patricia happy. Patricia and I have been married for nearly 10 years now. I've been with Williams Construction since I was 15, and it's almost been 20 years. Chris successfully graduated from the National Defense Academy and joined the Army. As an officer, he's been promoted and, at 30, has become a captain. I don't know much about military ranks, but they say it's equivalent to a captain in the old Army. He's now extremely busy, and we can only meet a few times a year. But seeing Chris grow has been my life's purpose, so I'm happy he's been promoted safely. However, I don't completely celebrate Chris's military promotions. My father-in-law, Daniel, is actively involved in protecting Article 9 of the Constitution and is critical of the military. He doesn't say anything to me, but he distrusts the unstable world situation and the government spending on military arms. I continue to maintain a modest relationship with Chris while respecting my father-in-law. One day, Chris called me and said he had decided to get married. The bride-to-be's name is Dorothy Wilson, a 28-year-old company employee. They met through a boss's introduction, hit it off well, and are now getting married. I really want you to attend the wedding. We hardly have any family, so if possible, please bring your sister-in-law too. It's a joyous occasion, of course, we'll attend. I wholeheartedly celebrated Chris's marriage. When I told Patricia, she also said she would definitely attend. Dorothy's father is a city councilman and is currently involved in a major development project planned by the city. That means we'll have a lot to talk about. Dorothy's mother passed away from an illness when Dorothy was 5, so her father dotes on his only daughter. Chris feels he must make her happy and is determined to do so. We plan to have a family meeting. but due to our busy schedules, it ended up being on the wedding day itself. So, the first time I met Dorothy's father, Steve Wilson, was at the wedding. I was incredibly nervous and felt nauseous before leaving. Thankfully, Patricia remained calm, which really helped. Heading to the venue, I talked with Chris in the groom's room. Chris was dressed in his army's ceremonial uniform, with a saber at his waist. Even as his brother, I was impressed by how handsome he looked. Chris apologized on behalf of his father-in-law. Steve, who, as a veteran city councilman and president of various associations, had difficulty finding time. When I said it didn't bother me, Chris looked relieved. Since we hadn't met before, I wanted to greet Steve before the wedding, but he still hadn't shown up at the venue. Soon, it was time for the ceremony to begin. The wedding was held smoothly at the shrine, and the reception began in the afternoon. Patricia and I went to greet the bride's relatives, but I noticed their lukewarm response. I was nervous, expecting many military personnel, but there were more men in regular formal attire than I thought. With Steve still absent, the reception started. 3 men in military ceremonial uniforms played trumpets as the bride and groom entered. The host, holding a microphone, solemnly proceeded with the banquet. In the middle of the guest of honor's speech, the door suddenly opened and a bald, fat man walked in. Finally, here comes Dorothy's father, a city councilman. Since he's here, I'll end my speech and let him say a few words. Applause erupted from the crowd as Steve took the microphone with a look of entitlement. I was stunned by his first words. Steve began with a long-winded self-introduction, detailing his achievements in the city council, and then said something outrageous. Our entire family has graduated from college. However, Chris's older brother, Mike, only finished middle school. Being a middle school dropout is a disgrace to the family. I want to minimize my contact with Mike. So, having Chris as his stepson means he can't stand being related to a middle school dropout like me. There was no need to bring this up while holding the microphone at the wedding. Patricia stood up with an angry look. What is he thinking? There are all kinds of people here. Does he think this is his political fundraiser? Calm down. Just ignore him. I can't. This is an insult not just to us but to Chris too. He's ruining the wedding. Patricia was about to approach Steve, so I stood up and desperately tried to stop her. The family meeting didn't happen because of him. He kept saying he was too busy to meet us. You don't know that for sure, please. Just sit down. At that moment, my younger brother Chris stood up from the groom's seat, walked over to his father-in-law, and took the microphone. Father-in-law, please stop insulting my brother. Don't you know who he really is? What? Who he really is? What are you talking about? Chris stood straight beside his father-in-law and began to explain. Sorry for the disturbance. My brother got a job at a construction company after finishing middle school. He overcame many hardships and is now the president of Williams Construction, which is said to be the best in the city. Williams Construction. But your brother's last name is Miller. If he married into the Williams family, shouldn't he have taken the Williams name? Names don't matter. Even without taking the name, he could inherit Williams Construction. That's proof of my brother's greatness. The room buzzed, and Steve's face turned pale. Chris continued. Father-in-law, you are currently leading a major city development project. The one in charge of that project is my brother, Mike. Higher-ups may say whatever they want, but do they understand the struggles of those on the ground? Of course they do. Do they really? I don't think so. If my marrying Dorothy brings any disgrace to my brother, I'm even willing to call off this wedding. Patricia, who had managed to sit down, clapped her hands toward Chris. Since she was 12, Patricia has never tolerated anyone insulting me. In a way, she's been devoted to me since then. Chris, that's wonderful. Keep going. I'm ashamed to be related to this bald-headed man. Chris continued with a wry smile. I don't know how great being a city councilman is, but I don't know anyone more remarkable than my brother. With our father missing, he's my only family. I'd like to ask Dorothy, who became my wife today." Dorothy, dressed in her wedding gown and looking bewildered, stood up and walked quietly to Chris's side. "Dorothy, you became my wife earlier at the wedding, but we haven't officially registered yet. If we are cut off, will you still follow me?" Chris handed Dorothy the microphone. I held my breath in anticipation. Dorothy answered energetically, "Of course, I will. My father often insults others. Because of that, I was even cut off by my friends. It's been so hard having a father like him." With that, Dorothy covered her face with her gloved hands and began to cry. Chris took the microphone and gently patted Dorothy's shoulder. "Thank you, Dorothy. I think many trials await us, but together we can overcome them. Let's face them together." "Yes." Patricia clapped her hands. Although many of the guests were Steve's associates, hesitant applause began to be heard. Gradually, it spread throughout the venue. I also clapped, celebrating Chris and Dorothy. With these two, I'm sure they can face any trials that come their way. Patricia whispered softly in my ear. Despite everything, this turned out to be the best wedding. Look at their happy faces. Yeah, the host has a tough job ahead, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime reception. Patricia calmed down and sat back in her chair. I also felt relieved and returned to my seat. At that moment, a man sitting at the front table raised his hand. "Chris," Will said, "may I say a few words? I am Will Takibana, also a city councilman like Steve Wilson." "Please go ahead." Will slowly stood up and walked to the podium where Chris and Dorothy were. Taking the microphone, Will first offered words of congratulations to Chris and Dorothy. Then, turning to Steve, he began to speak quietly. "Actually, I also entered the workforce after middle school. So, I understand the groom's brother's feelings well. In America's society, those of us who haven't even graduated high school have limited job opportunities. Many dreams were abandoned. Isn't that right?" I looked up at Will and nodded deeply. Will continued. "I gave up many dreams too. It wasn't because I lacked ability, but because I didn't have money. I thought I couldn't do anything without money, so I worked solely to make money, but I wasn't happy." Will cleared his throat softly, trying to calm the storm of emotions welling up inside him. I envied others and resented being born into a poor family. One day, I had the opportunity to get involved in volunteering, and for the first time, I felt the joy of being alive. It was the desire to help others that led me to become a councilman. Steve, perhaps irritated by Will's lengthy speech, shouted out, "What are you trying to say?" "The true mission of a city councilman is to serve the citizens. Did you come here just to shame the groom's brother, who is one of those citizens?" The room grew increasingly noisy. Not everyone associated with Steve held him in high regard. In fact, those who knew him well were likely aware of his poor character. Voices criticizing Steve began to emerge from all corners. Councilman Wilson didn't even attend his own daughter's wedding. He probably thought he could just network with beneficial people at the reception. So what if the groom's brother only finished middle school? If being a middle school dropout is a family disgrace, then Councilman Wilson is a disgrace to our city. Cries of "That's right," and others rushing to Steve to air their grievances could be heard, causing the reception to descend into chaos. Steve fled the venue as if escaping. Two men who seemed to be Steve's aides chased after him. "Running away, coward!" Jeers were hurled from all directions. Chris took the microphone again and addressed the remaining guests. "I'm truly sorry for the commotion. If anyone feels uncomfortable, please feel free to leave. For those who still wish to celebrate with us, we will continue the wedding as planned. Enjoy yourselves." Chris handed the microphone back to the host and returned to the groom's seat. The host, experienced as ever, smoothly continued the ceremony as if nothing had happened. I had been worried about the awkward atmosphere since Patricia and I were the only ones on the groom's side, But there were no issues. The excitement from the earlier commotion had everyone buzzing, with lively discussions about the city's future at various tables. Guests approached our table with beer, offering drinks and encouragement. The future of this city is in your hands, so make it a great one. A middle school graduate and now a company president. That's amazing. You're at the center of urban planning, so the responsibility is huge. Each time, I apologized and smiled. I had hoped to remain inconspicuous, but I ended up having to give a speech. I promised to create a city where everyone can enjoy themselves. Thank you for your support. The entire room, including Chris and Dorothy, erupted in applause. It turned out to be a strange wedding, but it was definitely unforgettable. Chris and Dorothy's wedding somehow ended without further incident. However, that wasn't the end of the story. Someone who attended the reception submitted a letter to the newspaper's readers' column. Although the names were withheld, it mentioned a city councilman who called being a middle school graduate a disgrace. That post caused unexpected ripples. Unlike in big cities, rumors spread quickly in small towns, so it soon became widely known that the councilman in the newspaper was Steve. I don't consider Steve family, nor do I plan to have any dealings with him in the future. Even though I felt fine about it, my father-in-law Daniel was furious. That man has no right to be a city councilman. He should resign. Calm down, father-in-law. I don't care at all. I don't want to stoop to his level. No, you see, from what I've heard, there might be a resolution submitted in the city council to urge him to resign. This news shocked me. Councilman Will, who attended the reception, might be leading this effort. However, since Steve didn't commit any misconduct as a councilman, it seems a bit excessive. When I expressed my opinion, Patricia loudly countered, "You've always been patient like this. But you need to stand up for yourself when it matters. If you had the opportunity, wouldn't you have chosen to go to school? It's a councilman's job to consider such paths." Now that she mentioned it, she's right. I don't like using the word if often, but if I had gone to high school, if I had gone to college, my life would have been completely different. Even so, I have lived without much regret or frustration. I think it's because I've been blessed with the people around me. Joining Williams Construction, being trained by senior carpenters, and being recognized by Daniel. Even meeting Patricia wouldn't have happened if I had gone to high school or college. If I had married someone other than Patricia, I might have been happy in my own way, but I can't imagine anyone else but Patricia. Even if I were reborn, I would still want to marry Patricia. However, there are still young boys and girls who struggle with only a middle school education. I do think about how I can help those who had to start working right after middle school. I believe that's a way to make society a little better, and that it's the duty of a councilman to steer society in a positive direction. In that sense, it's understandable why people say Steve is unfit to be a councilman. After starting her life with Chris, Dorothy completely cut ties with Steve. According to the story, Dorothy blocked all calls from Steve and never let him into their new apartment. A conversation reportedly took place through the apartment door. "I'm Chris's wife and your sister-in-law, so I'm also a disgrace to the family, right? Please don't say that. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." Even so, Dorothy never opened the door. Steve's words, "Being a middle school graduate is a disgrace to the family," had a significant impact on the relatives. Everyone began to feel ashamed of being related to Steve. I can't stand being associated with a man like that. I don't judge people by their education. Don't lump me together with him. That man is the real disgrace. I heard even his daughter Dorothy has cut ties with him. I want to do the same. And so, Steve became increasingly isolated. Since he lost his wife early, Dorothy was the only family he had. Watching Dorothy grow up was his greatest joy and purpose in life. Now, no one cares about Steve. He is only hated. More misfortunes struck Steve in his loneliness. A resolution recommending Steve's resignation was submitted to the city council. It wasn't because he belittled me for being a middle school graduate, but because various corrupt acts he had committed over the years were exposed. Investigating his nearly 20 years as a councilman revealed one misdeed after another. Misuse of political funds, facilitating the fraudulent admission of a company president's son, falsifying invoices for computers, and so on. It was astonishing how much came to light. However, it's undeniable that the trigger was indeed Chris's remark at the reception. Steve, who had been so confident, lost all his energy after being cut off by Dorothy and showed no will to fight. Thus, Steve resigned from the city council and became a recluse. Loved by no one, and not even pitied. He also had to resign from various positions in sports and volunteer organizations. There was nothing left for him to do at home. Living in a too quiet house with no visitors, what must he be thinking? Meanwhile, the city development project led by Williams Construction has been underway for 5 years, and the goal is in sight. The city's central area has changed significantly. The once narrow sidewalks are now wider, and separate bicycle lanes have been created, greatly reducing pedestrian bicycle accidents. A lush park where children can play safely is also nearing completion. I take Patricia and our 4-year-old son, Robert, to the park. Seeing the colorful playground equipment, Robert is ecstatic. However, since it's not fully completed yet, we can't let him play freely. I wanna play. Not there yet. Let's play in the sandbox. Robert looks disappointed. Normally, he loves playing in the sandbox, but the new equipment seems more enticing. When can I play? I pat Robert's head. It will be ready by the time you're a big brother, just a little longer. I say this while gently patting Patricia's belly. Patricia is now 7 months pregnant. I'm hoping for a girl this time, but Robert wants a boy. Why do you want a brother? Sisters are cute too. Because we can play adventure games together. I see. Adventure games with your sibling. That sounds fun. We've asked not to be told the baby's gender. Regardless of whether it's a boy or a girl, they will be equally cherished. Even though Robert says he wants a brother now, I'm sure he will adore his sister if he gets one. I know the value of having a sibling. If Robert gets a brother, they'll become as close and irreplaceable to each other as Chris is to me. We meet Chris and Dorothy once a week and have a great time together. They're also expecting their first child soon. It's going to be lively. I'm really looking forward to it.